to Studio 91 on KCSM's HD2. I'm Jayn Pettingill, and this new series is where live jazz meets the stories of the artists who shape it. Performing live in studio, we have two of the Bay Area's finest pianists, Dick Fregulia and former KCSM host Dick Conte, with special guests Steve Weber on bass and Jimmy Hobson on drums. Between numbers, we'll talk about their legacy, performing in and around the Bay Area for over 50 years, and their own paths taken in jazz. Support for Studio 91 comes in large part from a generous grant from the Michael Jarrett Fund. So, without further ado, let's get started with Dick Fregulia and his trio.
Folk song made popular by Miles Davis as a bebop classic, Dear Old Stockholm. So we're going to move on to play a tune by a guy I grew up with, sort of, or played gigs with a long time ago, Tom Harrell, who became a well-known writer and New York European trumpet player. This is called Sail Away.
Fregulia Trio on KCSM, Studio 91. I'm Jayn Pettingill.
We'll continue with a funky little thing called Grooveyard by Carl Perkins, but not the famous Carl Perkins. This was the bebop Carl Perkins that did not live long after the bebop era, and he wrote some good tunes and played with some good guys.
We're here in Studio 91 on KCSM's HD2. I'm Jayn Pettingill, and we have a very special guest here, Dick Fregulia at the piano with Steve Weber on bass, and also Jimmy Hobson on the drums. They're going to play one more tune to complete their set, but I do have a few questions. Because I know in your bio, Dick, you mentioned that Ahmad Jamal, George Shearing, Oscar Peterson, and Bill Evans are your influences.
And you heard some Earl Garner in there, too.
Okay, Earl Garner. But how do you choose? The piano is such a vast instrument when you think of the stylistic range, in the realm of jazz. I mean, I read a quote once from Eddie Harris, the saxophonist, and he said to spend 10 years on one person and transcribe everything, and then maybe you have a chance of going on to develop your own individual voice. But with an instrument like the piano, how do you focus on one person and get into who you are as well?
Well, I could never transcribe. I had a natural ear, though, so I would run into the other room and go down to the piano and play Shearing chords or play Garner chords or play it took a lot of years of playing gigs and learning on the gig. But I never know quite what I'm going to do. It's just nice having all that backlog of stuff. I have no idea I was going to do a Earl Garner beginning of the last chorus there. So it's like learning language, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you ever get to the point where you would write stuff down, or
eventually I got so I could, so I knew what chord changes were and I could transcribe off of records. But that was the last thing to put together. This is through maybe a 5 or 10 year period between age 16 and 25.
I see. Yeah. Did you study with somebody, or did you do
I
that
grew up
route?
I grew up playing classical piano, and I was one of the better local classical piano players, but I was more interested in sports, basketball. I'd practice my classical. I'd have my baseball bat and a basketball, and I have a comic book behind the music, and when the alarm clock went off, I was out of there, even in the middle of it.
Yeah. Well, baseball strikes me as kind of like an improv. I think baseball and jazz have a kind of a relationship.
I think basketball particularly, it's like a fast break.
Yeah,
you're running down, and I'm saying, okay, shall I pass it off to Jimmy, or shall I pass it off to Steve? Or shall I stop and take the jump shot myself?
Right. And the three of you seem to have almost a telepathic type of relationship, musically speaking. It sounds beautiful, by the way, you guys.
That's the joy of playing trios, the art of the jazz piano trio.
Right. How long have you been a trio?
He was my journalism teacher at Tamalpais High School in the 1970s.
Okay. You're not on mic, but maybe you could answer that.
Okay, well, Steve was a student of mine at Tamalpais High School, and we used to have informal jazz get-togethers in my room, and Steve was one of the bass players that would come in. And then I ran into him 20 years later, and he was playing electric bass and some jazz bass, and we got together and really enjoyed playing. So that's been about 20 years now we've been playing. Jimmy I met through another piano player, Larry Moss, and we've been playing together about 3 or 4 years, maybe a little longer. He has a recording studio, so we do recordings over there.
Yeah. And you also have your own label, right? Blue Koala?
I was just listening to an old interview that Dick Conte did on me at K's Jazz in 1977 when I first started my label and did a first recording of my own stuff. And that was at a time when jazz musicians were just beginning to do their own recording, their own production, their own hustling, their own liner notes.
Right.
And it was a pretty interesting time of year, time of our era.
I can imagine. Well, let's hear one more song. We're, again, here in Studio 91. If you're just joining us, we have two pianists, and Dick Fregulia, he's our first pianist, and we're going to sum up the set with him, and then we'll invite Dick Conte up to the piano bench.
This is the tune by Enrico Pieranuzzi, one of my favorite Italian piano players. It's called Fellini's Waltz.
Yeah. Very nice. Dick Fregulia and his trio here.
Okay,
Studio
I'm
91.
making room for the other Italian Dick.
Yeah, yes, you are. Yes. It's like a good Sunday meal. We're sharing the piano.
Let's see. Oh, we've trapped in here. Okay.
We've got
Right.
Dick Conte coming up next,
Next entree.
Steve Weber remains on bass, as does Jimmy Hobson. We're here in Studio 91 on KCSM's HD2. Jayn Pettingill here, and we're going to get started now with the other Richard Conte.
We're going to start with a couple of Miles Davis tunes.
indeed. The Dick Conte Trio on KCSM Studio 91. I'm Jayn Pettingill, and we have Dick Conte over on the piano bench.
Yes.
Yeah. So you just played two Miles Davis associated compositions.
Right.
It sounded just so swinging,
Oh,
so
thank you.
great. Yeah, you guys, because we heard Dick Fregulia earlier, you guys bring a really different feel
Yeah.
to the trio, and it's really exciting to be in the room and to hear that, because I think this Dick here, Dick Fregulia, you bring more of a composed, arranged sense to things. I mean, I'm just speaking in generalities, and you seem to just be much more stream of consciousness, and I'm wondering what you think.
Yeah, that's my problem.
Have you talked to us?
I never know what I'm going to do. As Dick was saying, it just kind of unfolds. But we've been playing together a long time. Steve and I started playing in '99, wasn't it? Yeah, so it's, 26 years now.
Wow.
And Jimmy and I hooked up about maybe 3 years ago, something like that. We had a steady gig at Murphy's Pub in Sonoma for going on 3 years.
Nice.
And we were there last week, in fact, and we'll be there again later in December.
Good.
And then we all hooked up at the Marin Joe's, and that's where we started doing the double and triple piano deal with actually 4 piano players.
Wow.
With that
Wow.
rhythm section.
God, very nice.
And so it was kind of fun. It was kind of a round robin. And we've done that several times at JB Piano in San Rafael, where we had actually 4 of us, right? 4 piano players in the same rhythm section.
Wow, you guys are just road tested, aren't you?
Yeah.
In terms of playing piano. I mean, I also think having a gig like that, Dick Fregulia and Dick Conte, to have like a regular, steady place with a rhythm section. I mean, that's just so invaluable in terms of developing repertoire, developing language,
Right.
and just getting a whole lot of great stuff under your fingers. And
And then we occasionally do a quartet with Steve Heckman on saxophone. We've been going, I guess we've done, 20 years at the jazz school in Berkeley
Right.
with Heckman and Steve. And then we've had 3 different drummers, actually, Michael Aragon, Bill Moody, and then most recently Jimmy.
That's
And our kid Atana as well, yeah.
wow. Yeah, it's fantastic.
So I've had some really wonderful drummers, and Jimmy has joined us, as I said, about 3 years ago, and it feels very comfortable.
Yeah, no, it sounds and feels very comfortable from my
Yeah.
vantage point. You also have a scholarship at
Jazz Piano Scholarship that Kathleen Lawton set up back 20 years ago at the Jazz School, and we do that each year around my birthday, June 13th, with the closest Saturday to June 13th, and we award a scholarship to one of their up-and-coming young pianists. They have some great kids
Yeah.
coming through that school.
Yeah, they
and
do.
some of them are amazing at 15, 16 years old.
Yeah.
Each year, it blows my mind at how accomplished they are.
Yeah, it's
So it's
unreal.
fun.
Yeah, the talent coming forward and bringing the music into new
Yeah.
areas. It's
It's
very
almost
exciting.
scary to follow them after they've done their number.
Yeah. But both of you bring such a breadth and depth of wonderful pianist history to this venue, and it's so exciting to hear
Well,
both
Dick
of you.
mentioned Errol Garner. He was one of
Yeah.
my first favorites as a teenager. I would sit in the basement and listen to Errol Garner records and try to figure out what he was doing.
Yeah.
And then I had a classical teacher as well who was also a very fine jazz piano player. I mean, he said, the classical is not making it, so let's just drop that. I said, great, let's drop that. And
Yeah.
so we started getting into chord changes and standards and ballads and all that. And then from then on, it was pretty much just listening and playing on the bandstand. I didn't have that much formal training, really.
Wow. Well, it's,
I'm more of an ear player.
yeah. No, it's beautiful.
I think Dick had a little bit more education than I did, but I've had a couple of influences over the years, different players that I've sat down with and gotten a few.
Well, it's all here. All the education we need is right here in this room with these records. But let's get back to Dick Conte and
Mentioning
the trio.
Errol Garner, I'd like to do one of my favorite tunes, Misty,
Okay.
and then we'll lead that into going on Green Dolphin Street.
Wonderful.
All right. you.
How about you play one more, Dick?
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, please. Beautiful. Dick Conte at the trio. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to bring the other Dick up here, Dick Fregulia, and just to make it proper and find out where you guys are playing, websites that people can find you at, and more information so that folks can come out and hear you. Dick Fregulia played earlier here at Studio 91. He took the first half of the hour. Dick Conte, and we have Steve Weber on bass and Jimmy Hobson on drums. All of these folks play together for a very long time, and hopefully that will keep on continuing. And so, Dick, where...
My website is dickcontejazz.com.
Okay.
And
I'm at Dick Fregulia Jazz. Jazzpiano.com.
Jazz Piano.
Yeah, Dick
Okay.
Fregulia Jazzpiano.com.
you almost
Okay.
forgot your own website.
Great, great.
And I have no gigs in sight. This is it. This is my dying moment.
No. That's a travesty. So go to Dick Fregulia jazzpiano.com. Check him out. He also has his own label, Blue Koala. Do check out Dick Conte, and you could have this beautiful music surround you.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you guys so much. And also, we've got, well, special thanks to our sponsor, the Michael Jarrett Fund, for making Studio 91 possible, and also the back room here, our technical crew, Noah McDonough, Jake Myers, Keith Inman, and our fearless leader, Mr. Chris Cortez, who makes so much of this happen. I want to thank you guys for
And
sharing.
thanks to KCSM for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah, good fun.
Yeah. Why don't you go out with a tune for us, please?